Over the course of the last several movies, we've been able to take all of our database functions that we were using before and put them into a database class. In this movie, I want us to take a brief look at how that object-oriented programming approach is actually an improvement over just having those loose functions. Now, you probably noticed some of the advantages to using an object-oriented approach as we were going. For example, we were able to group all of our code together. So things like MySQL prep, which became escape value, those can be grouped with our database. And so all of our code for our database is in one place. We also saw how it makes the code modular, and we would be able to potentially swap in a different database if we needed to. And we were able to write methods like numRows, which calls MySQL numRows, and therefore allows our code to be database neutral. One thing that we didn't explicitly talk about, though, is that improvements made to this object are now available on every page where the object has been instantiated or where it's being called. So suddenly, by adding the method numRows to our object, anywhere in our site that we were calling the database, we now have the ability to call numRows. So any improvements or complexity that we add to our object automatically propagates out to that object every time that it's being used throughout our site. Let's make another kind of improvement like that now. Let's add a new public attribute, which will be called lastQuery. And it will allow us to find out what the last query we tried to run was. Now, in the past, we've done this using just an echo statement, and that was a really good way to debug. Now we can actually just make it part of query. Whenever we run a query, we can just set this last query equal to the SQL. So we'll just set that value each and every time. So we can always just ask this object, hey, what was that last query you ran? One good place that we can put that is in our confirm query method. So let's come down here to this private method, and let's just alter it slightly. And instead of just dying with this simple text and the SQL error, let's have it construct a string out of that same string, but then also add the last SQL query to it, and then die using that string. So let's save it. In order to try this out and see how it works, one easy way to do it is for us to come back over to our index page, and let's just take out these comments where we got that error before. We'll save it. We'll go back to Firefox, and let's reload the page. Database query failed. We got the same error, but now we also get last SQL query, and we can actually look at our query and see if we can figure out what was wrong with it. Now, this might be something that you only want to do in testing. Once we get to production mode, you might want to come back over here and actually just comment this out so that it doesn't get appended anymore. And that proves the point that I was talking about, that simply by commenting it or uncommenting it, it suddenly changes what happens throughout our website. It changes the way this object behaves. There's one other function that I think is ripe for some improvement. Let's jump up here to this escape value. Now, a value might get escaped on a single web page 5, 10, 15 different times. If we're pulling in a whole lot of form data, we might be doing a lot of escaping. Every single time that this function gets called, it's going to check and see our magic quote set. Does this function exist? Every single time. It occurs to me that that's wasted processing power, and we're just slowing our site down. Instead, let's take these two lines, and we'll just cut them, and we're going to just jump up to the top of the document here. So I'm just going to paste those two checks that go on right here. I'll take the comment out. I don't need that anymore. And instead of new enough PHP, I'm just going to rename it as real escape string exists. There we go. And what I want to do is set attributes equal to these. So each of these is just going to become this magic quotes active, this real escape string exists. So now what I need is to have those attributes, and I'll make them private. There's no reason I need to get to them from outside the class. And this one will just be called magic quotes active. And this one will also be private. And real escape string exists. So stop and think about this for a second. What this means is that now, down here at the very bottom, when I instantiate the MySQL database class, one time and only one time, it runs the construct method. And that will check to see, is magic quotes active? And it will save that value here. And it does the same thing for real escape string. So we don't have to waste the processing power checking that each and every time. Now we have those attributes that we can check. So instead, let's just copy this one because we changed the name. So now if we check that attribute and it's true, then perform the same thing. And we'll just put this in front of magic quotes active. And then here we can also put this in front of magic quotes active. So now it does the same escape of the value that it did before, but it doesn't have to waste the processing power each and every time. And back to the original point that I was making, these changes now propagate out to anywhere that we were using the object. I feel like we have a pretty good database class now. some people like to go ahead and populate this database class with all of their database calls and everything, but we're not going to do that. Instead, what we want to do is create a separate user class, which is going to make use of the database class whenever it needs to access the database. But it can have a lot of other things that are unrelated to the database in that class as well. So we'll work on the user class in the next movie.